Her son tried to declare her mentally unfit while she sat 2 rows behind him in court. Eleanor Mallory, retired civil clerk and widow, didn't flinch. Joel, her only child and self-appointed protector, called her confused and reached for her money. By week's end, his power of attorney was revoked, his access frozen, and his inheritance erased. She'd raised him with trust. Now she answered him with law, and when he came to claim her life, the courtroom answered first. The mahogany-paneled courtroom smelled of varnish and nerves, sharp and acrid. It was just after 9 a.m. when Joel Mallory stepped up to the microphone. His suit was navy, pressed too hard at the cuffs, and he held his expression the way a man clutches a winning scratch ticket, tight and giddy and trembling just beneath the surface. "Your Honor," Joel said with practiced concern, "my mother is in decline. I fear she's no longer capable of managing her finances, and I'm asking the court to reaffirm the power of attorney we filed last March. There's some urgency here." Judge Tolman, stone-faced and silvery at the temples, peered down over his glasses. "And where is your mother now, Mr. Mallory?" Joel glanced toward the empty plaintiff's table, then let out a small, theatrical sigh. "She refused to come. She's been disoriented lately, doesn't understand what's happening." Eleanor blinked slowly. 2 rows behind him, she was right there, a pale gray cardigan draped over her shoulders. Her breathing was calm, but her knuckles were white around the strap of her purse. Joel hadn't turned around once. Her purse held exactly one thing besides her lipstick and driver's license, a sealed manila envelope containing the notarized revocation of the power of attorney he was so eager to enforce. Let him talk, she thought. "I've had to step in more and more," Joel continued. "She's missed appointments, forgot to pay property taxes, gave money to scammers over the phone. I love her, but we're past the point of trusting her judgment." A bead of sweat appeared at his temple. A little fast, that detail. Too fast. Eleanor had worked 39 years in civil court. She knew when a case was dressed in panic. Judge Tolman lifted a pen. "Did she sign the original POA of her own volition?" "Yes, sir," Joel replied quickly. "And have you noticed any medical decline? Any documentation?" Joel fumbled for a folder from his leather briefcase. "I have some emails from her primary care physician and a letter from a neurologist recommending cognitive screening, but we haven't finished testing yet. That's part of the urgency. I need legal access to keep things from spiraling." "Very well," the judge said, jotting something down. "Given that the medical picture is incomplete and Miss Mallory is not present to speak for herself, I'll postpone a final ruling until Thursday. 48 hours. That should be enough time for further clarification." Joel opened his mouth, maybe to press harder, but stopped. The gavel hit once, sharp, not angry, and the session adjourned. Eleanor stood, slow, deliberate, her purse still in hand. He turned then, finally, and saw her. "Mom?" His voice cracked at the edges, no longer certain, no longer in control. She met his eyes evenly. There was no tremor in her stance, no confusion on her face. She took a single step forward, heels clicking clean against the tile, and nodded politely to Judge Tolman as he exited through his chamber door. Joel rushed over, voice lowered but fast. "Why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you tell me you were here?" Eleanor tilted her head, the way she used to when Joel was 7 and caught lying about brushing his teeth. The lie itself wasn't the insult. It was the belief that she wouldn't notice. "I wanted to hear how far you'd take it," she said, voice calm as chamomile. "Turns out pretty far." He looked down at the purse, a flicker of realization. "What's in there?" "You'll find out soon." Outside the courthouse, the air was heavy with late summer humidity. Across the street, someone's lawn sprinkler ticked in slow arcs. Eleanor walked out slowly, the heels of her loafers pressing into the concrete with finality. Joel trailed behind, his phone in hand now. "Mom, we don't have to do this in court. Let's talk, just you and me." "Please." She turned, adjusting the purse strap on her shoulder. "I'll see you in court, Joel, for real." And then she walked away, not once looking back. The pen left a whisper on the paper, ink gliding across legal fiber as if Eleanor's hand had waited its entire life for this moment. She signed with clarity, precision, not the tremor Joel described in court, not the hesitancy of someone slipping. It was a signature with backbone. Dina Estabrook leaned forward, scanning the lines with narrowed, seasoned eyes. "That's it. Revocation filed. Power of attorney officially void." She tapped the embossed seal on the bottom of the last page, the notary stamp catching the glow of her brass desk lamp. Her office smelled faintly of leather portfolios and old lavender sachets, the scent Eleanor remembered from filing estate transfers back in '94. Dina slid the documents into a folder labeled E. Mallory, urgent in red ink. It'll hold, she said, looking directly into Eleanor's eyes. But he'll go nuclear. Eleanor gave a soft nod, her mouth set in a tight line. She clasped her handbag with both hands as if studying it, or herself. Let him, she said. I know what I'm doing. She didn't say it for bravado. She said it like a fact, like reading a date off a calendar. A week earlier, the air outside the courthouse had still carried late spring. Wet leaves, a little honeysuckle, kids laughing as they darted off the bus. She'd driven herself here, thank you very much. Joel hadn't known. That was the point. I started noticing it 6 months ago, Eleanor said quietly. Little things. He started opening my mail before I could. Said it was just to help. Then he took my debit card to simplify errands, canceled my dentist, switched my prescription to one pharmacy, then another. Dina scribbled notes. Control creep, she murmured. Common in elder financial abuse, usually cloaked as caregiving. Especially with family. Eleanor exhaled slowly. After his divorce, I let him move into the guest house, figured he needed a soft place to land. That was my mistake. Dina looked up. That wasn't a mistake. That was kindness. Eleanor's throat tightened, but she didn't let it show. Kindness with interest. I gave him keys, he took the locks. They froze for a moment in shared understanding. Dina handed over a final document. Asset protection freeze. It blocks new withdrawals above $500 and flags irregular account access. Only you or your designated fiduciary can lift it. Eleanor took the pen again. This time she felt the weight of it more. She was locking her life back in her own hands. She was sealing the vault before her son could strip it bare. I also opened a new safe deposit box at First Union, Eleanor said. Didn't want to keep this envelope at home. Dina's eyebrows lifted. That courthouse brain of yours still sharp as ever. It better be, Eleanor said, folding the signed papers neatly into her purse. He thinks I'm slipping. What I am is done playing. Outside the office, the day had turned gray and wind-washed. As Eleanor climbed into her car, her phone buzzed against the leather seat. A message from Joel. No hi, Mom, no smiley face, just blunt text. I added you to a memory screening on Friday. It's already scheduled. Don't forget. She stared at the message for a long moment, the audacity, the arrogance, as if she'd missed something, as if she hadn't already seen the curtain pulled back on his whole act. She didn't reply, but she did smile, just a little. The exam room smelled like dusted pine and lemon sanitizer, artificial cheer wrapped around quiet dread. Eleanor sat perfectly upright in the cracked vinyl chair, her feet crossed neatly at the ankles, her handbag resting in her lap like a courtroom brief. Dr. Harmon was younger than she expected. Mid-30s maybe, with a soft jawline and a Princeton diploma mounted squarely on the wall behind him. His shirt was too white, like he'd just unwrapped it that morning. He smiled at her gently, pen poised. Joel sat in the corner, arms folded across his chest, legs bouncing with a nervous rhythm he clearly couldn't control. So, the doctor began, flipping through the intake file, we're going to run a brief cognitive screen. It's non-invasive, mostly verbal. Lovely, Eleanor said, adjusting the silver pin on her lapel. Should I warn you I do crossword puzzles in ink? Dr. Harmon chuckled, but Joel didn't. His fingers drummed on the chair's armrest like a telegraph he didn't know how to silence. They began. Can you tell me what day it is? Thursday, Eleanor answered. June 8th. And the year? 2025, she replied, smooth. Though it feels like we barely survived 2020, doesn't it? The doctor smiled again, but slower this time. He moved on. What's the name of the current president? President Aguilar, she said crisply. And Vice President Nina Bloom, unless she's been impeached for that ridiculous budget speech. I haven't checked the news since breakfast. Joel shifted in his seat. Eleanor didn't look at him. Her gaze stayed on the doctor. Level, composed. Repeat these 3 words back to me. Apple, chair, penny. Apple, chair, penny. A few more memory exercises followed. Spatial recall, simple subtraction, word associations. She played along, leaning in just enough to seem cooperative, but every answer was offered with an edge, like a subtle blade turned gently in a gloved hand. Spell world backwards. DLROW, she replied, then added, Would you like that in Morse too? Dr. Harmon blinked. Excuse me? I clerked civil court for 39 years, Eleanor said. Retired last fall. I've transcribed witness testimony in 3 languages and once found a typo in a Supreme Court brief. My mind may be 76, doctor, but it isn't slipping. Joel stood. She's having a good day. Joel, she said without turning her head, you said the same thing to the dentist when I remembered my own insurance ID number. He hesitated, hands splayed in the air like he was trying to prove he didn't mean harm. Look, I'm not saying she's lost it entirely. I just think she needs help staying on top of things. Dr. Harmon flipped the page in his notebook. His brow creased. I'd like copies of today's notes, Eleanor said firmly. All of them, every form I sign, every evaluation. Under the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, I'm entitled to full access to my medical records. Joel's jaw tightened. I'll make sure you get them, Dr. Harmon said carefully. She smiled. Appreciate that. For a beat, the only sound was the wall clock ticking toward noon and the faint hum of the central air overhead. Would you mind recalling those 3 words again? The doctor asked. Eleanor met his gaze. Apple, chair, penny. Then, leaning slightly forward, the apple was poisoned, the chair was taken, and the penny? It was mine, and he took that too. Dr. Harmon blinked. Joel snapped, stepping toward the desk. She's being dramatic. She can't handle her finances anymore. There it was. The air cooled, not the room, just the space between them. Eleanor said nothing. She simply pulled out a small notepad from her bag and began writing, slow, looping strokes. What's that? Joel asked. My own notes, she said, eyes still down. Because you just gave me your next mistake. Eleanor pulled on a pair of soft cotton gloves, not for dust but for dignity, the kind a woman wears when touching things that once mattered and still might. The late morning sun angled through the blinds, slicing the living room into pale gold and deep shadow. She moved slowly but deliberately, starting with the secretary desk she'd once inherited from her mother. Every drawer had a story. Every folded slip of paper whispered something Joel had underestimated. First, the pension folder. She laid the documents out on the dining room table, one by one, each form dated, signed, copied. Her city pension, unbroken since 1983. She jotted down the payout details on a yellow legal pad. Next came the savings statements, 2 CDs maturing in October. Then a dusty blue envelope tucked beneath them, government bonds her late husband purchased in the 90s, still accruing. She smiled faintly. Joel wouldn't have known how to find these, even if he'd torn the place apart. He didn't understand that paper, to her generation, meant permanence. In the hallway closet, behind a box of Christmas lights and a cracked tennis racket, she pulled out a fireproof box. Inside, her deed, a copy of the will, a laminated list of emergency contacts, and an envelope addressed to herself in her own handwriting, dated 5 years ago. She didn't open it. She didn't need to. In the guest house, things had been different. Joel had helped set up online bill pay, helped streamline her medical accounts. She remembered now how he'd insisted on linking his email to her bank alerts. Just so nothing slipped through the cracks, he'd said. She opened her desk drawer and found the checkbook. Tucked inside, like a tumor in a clean scan, was a debit card. Her name in small type, Joel's name in bold. He hadn't told her about this one. The car ride to Kingston Bank was silent, save for the low hum of the air conditioner. Eleanor sat tall in the chair across from the banker, a woman in her early 40s with dark curls pulled into a neat bun. I'd like to close all accounts jointly held with this name, Eleanor said, sliding the card across the table. The banker looked at the card, then back at Eleanor. Mallory? You're Eleanor Mallory? That's right. You helped my mom settle her probate case back in 2010. You stayed 2 hours after court to explain how to file without a lawyer. Eleanor gave a modest shrug. Seemed like the right thing to do. The banker smiled. Then let's lock this down. They opened a secure trust account only Eleanor had access to. They set up fraud alerts and secondary authentication. As she left the bank, the sun had risen higher. It gleamed against the windshield like a quiet assurance. Her next stops came quickly. Dr. Harmon's office, records requested and firewalled. Walgreens, prescriptions transferred, new pharmacy, new doctor. No more digital footprints for Joel to manage. By evening, Eleanor had a manila folder filled with confirmations, account statements, and a single-type document labeled Asset Inventory, E. Joyce Mallory. She slid it into her safe and locked it with a new code. 1 Mallory. She slid it into her safe and locked it with a new code. One Joel would never guess. There was satisfaction in order, in clarity, but not relief, not yet. She was brushing her teeth when she heard it. Bang, bang, bang. The sound rattled her bathroom mirror. She wiped her mouth and stepped into the hallway. Her feet were bare, her breath shallow. Another knock, louder now, urgent. She moved to the front door and flipped on the porch light. Joel stood there, fists clenched, jaw tight, breathing heavy like he'd run from somewhere, or from himself. "What are you hiding?" he barked. She didn't answer. She just stared through the screen door like a woman watching a storm she'd already reinforced the windows for. Eleanor stepped into the courthouse with the quiet resolve of someone who'd once watched perjurers unravel with a single sentence. She'd worn slate gray, clean lines, no flash. Her heels clicked against the tiled floor like a slow metronome. Her purse, firm against her ribs, held the envelope. Not the metaphorical one. The envelope. Inside, her official POA revocation, notarized and recorded, a formal complaint of elder coercion, printouts of online banking changes she hadn't authorized, a log of every pharmacy switch and calendar entry she hadn't scheduled, and a sworn affidavit from Dr. Harmon filed just 2 days ago declaring patient exhibits full cognitive clarity and agency in all legal, financial, and medical matters. She didn't walk fast. Let him wait. Courtroom 2B was colder than usual, and for a moment she wondered if the bailiff remembered her. Maybe not. New generation now. Fewer nods of recognition. But Dina Estabrook was already seated at the plaintiff's table, file open, fingers steepled under her chin. She looked up and gave Eleanor a single sharp nod. Showtime. Joel was mid-sentence when he noticed her. He stopped talking for a beat. He just stared. Eleanor walked straight down the center aisle, slow and silent, her eyes never leaving his. She could see it in his expression, the flicker of panic, confusion, calculation. The way his gaze darted from her to the bench, back to Dina, then to the brown envelope now in Dina's hand, the one he hadn't counted on. Judge Tolman adjusted his bifocals, already noting the entry on his docket. "Miss Mallory, we received your petition. Is this counsel with you today?" "She is, Your Honor," Eleanor said calmly. "And I've submitted evidence to be entered into record." Joel stood. "Wait, this isn't fair. I didn't even know she had a lawyer." "She's not required to tell you that, Mr. Mallory," the judge interrupted, "but this is about her protection." "No," Eleanor said, voice crisp as frost. "This is about yours." The judge lifted an eyebrow. Dina stood now, flipping the folder open. "Your Honor, we've submitted a full revocation of the previously held power of attorney, pursuant to New York General Obligations Law, Section 5, 1511. We've also filed a formal complaint alleging financial coercion, digital privacy breaches, and unauthorized fiduciary actions committed by Mr. Mallory under the revoked POA." Eleanor watched Joel's jaw go slack. His tongue pressed against the inside of his cheek like he was trying to bite back a curse. Dina continued, handing documents to the court clerk. Included are notarized statements, transaction records, medical confirmation of mental competency, and testimony from neutral witnesses regarding patterns of control and manipulation. The judge flipped through the first few pages, eyes narrowing slightly. "Is there a rebuttal to these materials, Mr. Mallory?" Joel cleared his throat. "She's confused. She doesn't know what she's doing. I was just trying to keep her safe." "Sir," the judge said flatly, "these documents suggest you accessed her finances without consent, rerouted private medical information, and attempted to enforce authority you no longer legally held. Is any of that inaccurate?" Joel said nothing. The silence in the room hung like static. Eleanor didn't flinch. She had lived enough years to know when a room was tipping in her favor. The judge laid down the file. "All power of attorney privileges previously held by Mr. Mallory are suspended, effective immediately. The court orders a formal review of fiduciary actions taken during the contested period. Additionally, we're issuing a temporary property separation order pending review." Joel blinked. "Wait, property separation?" Eleanor finally turned her head to look at him, direct and razor sharp. "I trust the court," she said, her voice clear as glass. "I do not trust my son." That sentence, 16 words evenly spaced, landed heavier than any accusation. Even the bailiff tilted his head. The judge nodded. "Mr. Mallory, you are to vacate Miss Mallory's residence within 72 hours. Court enforcement will be arranged if necessary." Joel opened his mouth, then shut it again. He looked around like a drowning man scanning for a shoreline that wasn't there. Eleanor sat down calmly, smoothing the skirt over her knees, and behind her, Dina quietly zipped the envelope shut. Joel stood in the gravel driveway with a trash bag in one hand, his gym duffel slung over the other shoulder. His shirt was untucked, sweat darkened the collar. The sun hadn't yet climbed above the maple trees, but the air was already thick and impatient. Eleanor stood on her porch like a sentinel, arms folded, gaze steady. The screen door behind her creaked gently with the morning breeze. The deputy marshal beside her didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence alone, badge on belt, body cam blinking red, was enough to confirm that this wasn't a bluff. "You're actually doing this?" Joel spat, pacing back and forth like a cornered animal. "Over a misunderstanding, over paperwork?" Eleanor didn't blink. "You forged financial access to my life. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a felony in slow motion." "I was helping," Joel said, louder now, voice rising in pitch. "You were drifting." "I stepped in because I had to." "You stepped in," she said evenly, "because you thought no one would stop you." The marshal stepped down from the porch and approached Joel. "Sir, you've got 30 minutes to finish gathering personal property. You're not to take any items not specifically listed on the court-reviewed property form. Any disputes go through civil claims." Joel huffed out a breath and turned back toward the guest house. "You're ruining the family!" he shouted over his shoulder. Eleanor raised her voice, not angry, just clear. "Then you shouldn't have tried to steal it." The screen door snapped shut behind her. Inside, she moved with efficiency born from decades of clerical order and courtroom protocol. First, she opened her safe, pulled the new keys from their labeled envelope, and changed the locks: front door, back door, garage, basement, shed. Then came the digital systems, the security panel, Wi-Fi password, Ring doorbell login. She reprogrammed the smart thermostat, deleted Joel's backup profiles, revoked every device paired to her system. A small, sharp satisfaction built with every beep of a confirmed reset. By noon, Joel's car had left the driveway. He didn't knock again. He didn't say goodbye. Eleanor stood at the kitchen sink rinsing a coffee mug when she felt the first true moment of silence. Not quiet. Silence. No footsteps on the guest house gravel, no phantom alerts on her phone, no opened mail left on the foyer table. Her house felt like hers again. She pulled out her file folder labeled Property Protections, dialed her insurance agent, and calmly requested a full policy review. "I'd like to increase liability coverage," she said. "Add internal monitoring for structural damage, and I want to verify I'm the sole policyholder on record." The agent paused. "Did something happen?" Eleanor looked out the window at the empty driveway. "Not anymore," she said. That evening, the doorbell rang. It was Wanda from next door, carrying a crock pot and a duffel bag. "I figured you shouldn't spend the night alone," Wanda said, brushing past her with the kind of familiar assertiveness only a true friend could manage. "I brought chili, extra cinnamon, and my ridiculous pajamas." Eleanor almost laughed. "You packed pajamas?" "I've been waiting for an excuse to dust off the fuzzy socks." Wanda grinned. They ate on the porch, the summer air finally cooling into something manageable. Fireflies blinked in the hedges. The chili was spicy, grounding. Eleanor leaned back in her chair, eyes soft but alert. "You okay?" Wanda asked. "I'm not used to quiet being safe," Eleanor said after a long pause. Later, after dishes were rinsed and the lamps dimmed, Eleanor's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. A new message, unknown number. "He did this to my parents, too." Eleanor stared at the screen. She didn't recognize the number, but she knew the initial. Marissa, Joel's ex-wife. The laptop was heavier than she remembered, black, smudged along the edges, with a cracked corner near the charging port. Joel had left it behind in his rush, likely thinking it was just a backup, nothing critical. He hadn't counted on Eleanor knowing where to look. She sat at her dining room table with the machine humming beside her, and Wanda across from her, watching with quiet curiosity. A ceramic mug of black coffee steamed between them. The sky outside had gone pale and overcast, gray like the world was holding its breath. Eleanor typed slowly. She knew Joel's preferred passwords, baseball stats, his birthday, the dog he never actually bought. It took 3 tries. On the 4th, the screen flickered to life. She scanned the desktop, banking PDFs, some expense logs, a tax folder, and one innocuous file labeled Plan Budget, final.xlsx. She clicked. The spreadsheet opened in layers, tabs labeled Liquidation. Obituary drafts, legal steps, long-term facility estimates. Her stomach clenched. Breath caught somewhere between her ribs and her spine. He'd mapped out everything. In liquidation, he had estimates of her property value with potential sale listings dated 3 months into the future. Her pension account was itemized with a running projection of drawdown limits. Every insurance policy, even her utility bills, were listed under a subtab titled Cost of Ownership Before Transfer. She clicked on Obituary Drafts. The first line read, Eleanor J. Mallory passed peacefully after a long battle with cognitive decline. She is remembered by her devoted son. Eleanor pushed back from the table as if the words burned her. Wanda leaned over, reading silently. Her hand curled into a fist on the tablecloth. He was planning to erase you, she whispered. No, Eleanor said, voice flat. He was planning to inherit me before I was even gone. She copied the entire folder onto a flash drive and placed it carefully in her leather file binder. Then she picked up her phone and called Dina. By that afternoon, the evidence had been filed with the court, classified under supplemental discovery, proposed intent, and malicious planning. Dina's voice was clipped and sharp when she called back. This isn't just financial abuse anymore, she said. This moves us into intent to defraud territory. I'm drafting the exploitation charge packet tonight. Eleanor didn't reply at first. Her eyes were on the printer, slowly spitting out pages like bones from a long-forgotten closet. Good, she said finally. Make it airtight. By evening, she was at the kitchen counter with her legal documents spread before her like a tactical map. She pulled out her will and flipped to the inheritance clause. The pen in her hand was firm, the ink fresh. She added the new clause line by line. Any individual who disputes or contests this will or attempts to override legal decisions designated herein shall be removed as a beneficiary and forfeit all claims. She signed it, initialed it, dated it. Then she reached for a separate form, medical proxy designation. She filled in Wanda's full name, contact info, and backup emergency number. Wanda blinked at the document when Eleanor slid it across the table. You're serious? You're the one who brings chili and flashlights, Eleanor said. I trust that more than someone who forged a pharmacy log in. They laughed for a second. It was real. Then the silence returned, heavier. The mail slot clinked just past sunset. Wanda went to check. She returned with a thick white envelope stamped with a courthouse seal. Eleanor took it without speaking. Her hands were steady now, predictable. Tremors had been replaced by something colder. She slid it open with a butter knife and unfolded the letter. It was a subpoena. Joel was filing a formal objection to her pension disbursement, claiming mental unfitness and recent history of instability. Wanda read over her shoulder. He's still clawing. Eleanor stared at the final line, eyes narrowing. Then let's sharpen the claws, she murmured. Courtroom 3C was packed tighter than usual. Rain tapping the high windows, murmurs under breath, the quiet rustle of papers and tension. Eleanor sat beside Dina, spine straight, lips pressed in a firm line. She wore a navy blue blazer with pearl buttons, her Kingston County lapel pin shining under the overhead lights. Today was not about survival. It was about record. Joel sat across the aisle, dressed in a charcoal suit that tried too hard. His lawyer, a man Eleanor didn't recognize, whispered something to him, but Joel was already sweating through his collar. His eyes flitted toward the gallery, landing briefly on Wanda, who met his gaze with such open contempt that he looked away almost instantly. Judge Tolman adjusted his bifocals and addressed the courtroom. Today's hearing pertains to Mr. Joel Mallory's claim that Miss Eleanor Mallory is unfit to manage her financial and legal affairs, and his motion to suspend pension disbursement on grounds of cognitive decline. Miss Mallory has filed a counter-motion seeking dismissal. Dina stood. We're prepared to proceed. Joel's attorney rose. Your Honor, Mr. Mallory will testify that his mother's behavior has become erratic. She's made unusual financial decisions, severed long-standing family relationships, and... Those aren't diagnostics, Judge Tolman interrupted, voice dry as salt. They're opinions. Where is your documented evidence? Joel stood abruptly. She accused me of forging things. I didn't forge. She had my mail rerouted. She called my ex-wife. This is classic paranoia. Dina didn't flinch. She stood and calmly handed a set of documents to the court clerk. Your Honor, we submit the following into evidence. Miss Mallory's last 5 years of tax returns, accurate, punctual, audited, and cleared. Results from her cognitive screening, 100% functional, signed by a licensed psychiatrist. And a copy of her civil service record, 39 years unblemished, including commendations from this very courthouse. Judge Tolman skimmed the pages, then gave Joel a long, unreadable look. Mr. Mallory, do you have a medical statement to support your concerns? Joel opened his mouth, then closed it. Dina continued, motioning toward the gallery. With the court's permission, we also have 2 witnesses prepared to testify. The judge nodded. Proceed. Wanda took the stand first. She wore a cardigan and flats, no makeup, her expression set in stone. State your relationship to the respondent. I'm Eleanor's neighbor. Lived next door 10 years. She helped me refinance my mother's estate when I didn't even know what a title search was. And what's your assessment of her mental state? Wanda tilted her head slightly. She's sharper than most attorneys I've met, including the one over there. She gestured not toward Joel's lawyer, but Joel himself. Laughter rippled through the gallery before the judge tapped his gavel once. Dina stepped forward. Can you describe what you witnessed between Mr. Mallory and Miss Mallory over the past 6 months? He erased her slowly, Wanda said, disguised it as caregiving, but I watched her disappear room by room. First the doctor appointments, then the checkbook, then the voice. The courtroom grew still with that last sentence. Even Joel's lawyer hesitated before objecting. The judge let it stand. By day 4, Joel looked smaller in his chair, shirt wrinkled, lips dry from whispering furiously with no strategic effect. He took the stand reluctantly. His testimony swung wildly, first defensive, then performative, then oddly accusatory. He tried to frame himself as overwhelmed, then victimized, then misunderstood. I was just trying to help, he said, palms out. She was confused. She needed me. Keene stood slowly. And did she need you to reroute her mail to a P.O. box in your name? That was logistics. Did she need you to pre-write her obituary? Joel's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Eleanor didn't move. She sat at the plaintiff's table, eyes locked on his. Not cruel, just certain, letting the silence indict him further. The judge called for a recess before closing arguments. Eleanor rose from her seat and stretched her back gently. As the jury filed out, she caught the gaze of the man in seat 6, a substitute teacher with scuffed boots. He gave her the smallest, quietest nod. Across the room, Joel stared at her, eyes hollow, jaw tight, like he was finally seeing the woman he thought he could erase. The courtroom was quieter than Eleanor had ever known it, not silent. There was still the hum of fluorescent lights, the faint rustle of jackets shifting, a cough from the back row, but something deeper had settled in. Finality. Like the room itself was holding its breath. 12 jurors filed back in with faces drawn but steady. Their foreperson, a woman in a forest green blazer with steady eyes and a silver watch, stood when prompted. Has the jury reached a verdict? Judge Tolman asked, hands folded, voice solemn. We have, Your Honor. The bailiff took the paper and handed it to the clerk, who read aloud with the clarity of a man used to shaping truth with breath. We, the jury, find the defendant, Joel Andrew Mallory, guilty of elder exploitation and coercive fraud. The words didn't echo. They landed hard, quiet, final. Joel didn't move. He sat like he'd turned to stone. No tears, no outburst. Just an eerie, blank stare toward the floor, as if refusing to acknowledge that the life he'd tried to manipulate had slipped entirely from his control. Eleanor didn't flinch. She didn't smile. She simply exhaled, for real this time, like air finally had permission to live in her lungs again. The clerk continued. In addition, we award the plaintiff, Miss Eleanor Joyce Mallory, restitution in the amount of $127,000 and punitive damages in the amount of $85,000. Gasps whispered through the gallery, but Eleanor didn't hear them. Her ears had narrowed to the rhythm of her own breath. Keene gave her a brief, respectful nod. Dina squeezed her hand once, no words. The judge adjusted his bench mic. Sentencing will follow immediately. Joel's attorney requested leniency. My client has no prior convictions and is prepared to comply with court mandates. Judge Tolman didn't even look at Joel. He looked at Eleanor. Miss Mallory, is there anything you wish to say before sentencing? Eleanor stood slowly, her knees stiff but locked in purpose. I raised him, she said. I don't regret that, but I will not excuse him. He didn't just steal money. He tried to steal my personhood. He weaponized trust, disguised control as care, and counted on my silence. A long pause. I won't cover for him again, not today, not ever. She sat. The gavel hit once. 14 months house arrest, effective immediately. 5-year financial guardianship ban. No access to bank accounts, estate documents, or POA privileges in the state of New York. Court is adjourned. There was no cheering, no applause. Just a slow, collective exhale, like truth had left its fingerprints on every surface. Outside, the cold hit Eleanor's face like a baptism. Bright sun spilled over the courthouse steps, reflecting off the wet pavement. She blinked against the light. Wanda met her at the base of the stairs, arms already wide. "You got your name back," she whispered, voice thick. Eleanor clung to her, not like someone broken, but like someone putting the last puzzle piece in place. "It's over," she said, barely believing it herself. "No," Wanda said gently. "It's yours." They drove home in silence, Eleanor's fingers brushing the ridges of the court papers on her lap. The sun followed them all the way to the co-op entrance. That night, Eleanor sat by her window with a mug of ginger tea. Outside, the sky folded into deep blue, dotted with the soft glow of porch lights and street lamps. Her inbox chimed once. A message from the New York State Office for Elder Advocacy. Subject line: Invitation to Speak. Legislative Committee on Elder Law Reform. She read it twice, then once more. The cursor blinked below their message like it was waiting on a pulse. The podium in the Albany Convention Center stood just a few inches taller than Eleanor expected. The overhead lights were hot, harsh. The room was packed, wall to wall, advocates, lawmakers, caregivers, law students scribbling notes in legal pads. Cameras blinked in the back row. Someone from PBS had mic'd the podium an hour earlier. She adjusted the cuffs of her blazer, navy again, her armor, a courtroom blue. She took a single breath, then spoke. "My name is Eleanor Joyce Mallory, and for the better part of a year I was spoken over, spoken for, and nearly spoken out of my own life. No notes, no teleprompter, just truth." She spoke for 17 minutes about coercion that wore the mask of compassion, about bank statements changed without signatures, pharmacy pickups rerouted, the quiet terror of realizing your own child sees your autonomy as negotiable. She spoke of courtrooms and betrayal and the cost of silence. She ended with a pause, then, "Power of attorney is not a license, it is not a shortcut, it is not a weapon." The room rose to their feet before she'd even left the stage. Reporters stood. Young volunteers clapped until their hands went red. Eleanor walked down the steps, slow, composed, but inside something had shifted. The wound hadn't closed, but it had found its use. By nightfall, clips of her speech were circulating. A PBS producer requested full footage for a feature on elder law reform. NPR ran a segment titled, "Her Voice Was Nearly Stolen. Now It's Saving Thousands." Emails poured in. Former colleagues from the Kingston County Courthouse. "I'm so proud of you. We should have seen it. I've never clapped harder in my life." Even Judge Tolman sent a letter, handwritten, formal, but unmistakably human. "You didn't just win your case, you changed what cases like this mean." And then came the phone call. The district attorney herself. Eleanor recognized the voice instantly. "We've launched a new initiative," the DA said, "a statewide task force focused on uncovering and preventing elder financial abuse. We're calling it the Mallory Protocol." Eleanor blinked. Her name turned into policy, into prevention. She didn't cry, but her hand gripped the phone a little tighter. "What do you need from me?" she asked. "Just what you've already given, your voice. And if you're willing, we'd like to consult with you part-time. You'd review filings, mentor legal interns, maybe speak to law enforcement groups." "I'll think about it," Eleanor said, but she already knew the answer. 3 weeks later, she sat behind a desk in a small office inside the legal aid clinic on Pine Street. A nameplate read, "Eleanor J. Mallory, Consultant." Her new life wasn't grand, it wasn't flashy, but it was real. Her mornings were filled with affidavit case review summaries, quiet emails from desperate daughters and overwhelmed social workers. Every day she wore the same gold watch her husband had given her 25 years ago. She never took it off. "I don't know how you survived it," a young intern named Dahlia said one afternoon, eyes wide with admiration. Eleanor looked at her, then down at a letter from an older client fighting a power of attorney overreach in Syracuse. "I didn't survive it," she said softly. "I used it." She walked home through crisp autumn air. Leaves swirled at her feet. The street was quiet. On her doorstep, a manila envelope, no stamp, hand-delivered. She turned it over. The handwriting, Joel Mallory. At her table, she stared at it for 7 minutes. Just her name on it. Not mom, not mother, just Eleanor Mallory. Like a stranger. She made coffee, didn't drink it. Instead, she took her old ceramic fire bowl, stepped onto the balcony, lit a match, and set the envelope on fire. It curled and blackened. She didn't flinch. She didn't need to know what was inside. Too late for apologies, too hollow for closure. Some letters aren't for reading, they're for release. Inside, she washed her hands and called the courthouse. Yes, I'd like to renew a restraining order. Same person, delivered in person. Understood, Miss Mallory, the clerk said. By noon, it was official. Her boundaries now had paper and power behind them. She spent the rest of the afternoon in dirt. She repotted her basil, clipped the withered leaves from her rosemary, and rearranged the planters along her balcony rail. The air smelled of soil and lemon balm. Her fingers were stained, her sleeves pushed back. It felt like cleansing, without ceremony. Around 5, Wanda arrived, balancing a still-warm dish wrapped in foil and a bottle of cider tucked under one arm. Pea cobbler, she said proudly. And no, I didn't use the frozen kind. Actual peeling happened. There were blisters involved. Eleanor smiled, took the dish, and set it on the stove. You didn't have to. I wanted to, Wanda said. You've been so quiet since the conference. I figured this place could use some sugar and sarcasm. They ate at the small round table by the window, laughing over courthouse gossip and the time Eleanor caught a clerk in 2003 trying to process a will signed in red crayon. The cobbler steamed on their plates, the sugar crust just crunchy enough to crackle under the fork. It was the kind of evening that had nothing to prove. No subpoenas, no cross-examinations, just light through the curtains and the soft hum of Wanda's off-key humming. Eleanor leaned back and looked around her home. The books on the shelf were hers. The passwords on the router were hers. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was warm, like a favorite blanket finally returned from the dry cleaner. Her name hadn't just been protected, it had been restored. The night settled like soft velvet over the co-op courtyard. Wanda left with promises of lemon bars next time and strict warnings about repotting plants without gloves. Eleanor washed the last plate and turned off the kitchen light. Her laptop chimed as she passed. One new email. From New York Governor's Office. Subject, Legislative Testimony Invitation. Body, Miss Mallory, your work has not gone unnoticed. We'd be honored if you would testify before the State Assembly on upcoming elder rights reform legislation. Eleanor stared at the screen, one hand on the mouse, the other already reaching for her calendar. The State Assembly chamber echoed like a cathedral built for reason. High ceilings, oak-paneled walls, and rows of sharpened minds waiting behind polished nameplates. Cameras blinked red from the far corners. The buzz of low murmurs faded as the sergeant-at-arms announced her name. Miss Eleanor Joyce Mallory, private citizen, retired civil clerk, testifying on behalf of Senate Bill 414, Elder Autonomy and POA Reform. Eleanor rose from her seat, not slowly, not for effect, just steadily. Every joint felt its age, but her spine didn't notice. She adjusted her glasses, approached the mic, and looked each legislator in the eye. My name is Eleanor Mallory, and for the better part of a year I was spoken over, spoken for, and nearly spoken out of my own life. No notes, no teleprompter, just truth. She spoke for 17 minutes about coercion that wore the mask of compassion, about bank statements changed without signatures, pharmacy pickups rerouted, the quiet terror of realizing your own child sees your autonomy as negotiable. She spoke of courtrooms and betrayal and the cost of silence. She ended with a pause, then, power of attorney is not a license, it is not a shortcut, it is not a weapon. The room rose to their feet before she'd even left the stage. Reporters stood. Young volunteers clapped until their hands went red. Eleanor walked down the steps, slow, composed, but inside something had shifted. The wound hadn't closed, but it had found its use. By nightfall, clips of her speech were circulating. A PBS producer requested full footage for a feature on elder law reform. NPR ran a segment titled, Her Voice Was Nearly Stolen, Now It's Saving Thousands. Emails poured in. Former colleagues from the Kingston County Courthouse. I'm so proud of you. We should have seen it. I've never clapped harder in my life. Even Judge Tolman sent a letter, handwritten, formal, but unmistakably human. You didn't just win your case, you changed what cases like this mean. Then came the call. The district attorney. We've launched a statewide task force on elder financial abuse. We're calling it the Mallory Protocol. Eleanor's name, now policy. We'd like you as a part-time consultant, filing reviews, mentoring, maybe some speaking. I'll think about it, she said, but she already knew. 3 weeks later, a nameplate read, Eleanor J. Mallory, consultant. The work wasn't glamorous, just real. Emails, affidavits, helping people like she once was. She still wore the same gold watch her husband gave her 25 years ago. I don't know how you survived it, said Dahlia, a young intern. I didn't survive, Eleanor replied. I used it. That evening, golden leaves scattered under her feet as she walked home. On her doorstep, a manila envelope, hand-delivered. No stamp, no return address. But the handwriting was unmistakable. Joel Mallory. She stared at it on her kitchen table. 7 minutes passed. She didn't open it. Instead, she grabbed her ceramic fire bowl, stepped onto the balcony, lit a match, and burned it. The envelope curled and blackened in silence. She never looked inside. Some letters aren't for reading, they're for letting go. Inside, she washed her hands, lavender soap, warm water, and dialed the courthouse. I'd like to file for a restraining order renewal, she said plainly. Yes, same individual. Yes, still unwanted contact. I have evidence. It was delivered in person. The clerk on the other end paused. Understood, Miss Mallory. We'll process it today. By noon, the paper trail was official. The boundaries she built now had ink and law behind them. She spent the rest of the afternoon in dirt. She repotted her basil, clipped the withered leaves from her rosemary, and rearranged the planters along her balcony rail. The air smelled of soil and lemon balm. Her fingers were stained, her sleeves pushed back. It felt like cleansing without ceremony. Around 5, Wanda arrived, balancing a still warm dish wrapped in foil and a bottle of cider tucked under one arm. Pea cobbler, she said proudly. And no, I didn't use the frozen kind. Actual peeling happened. There were blisters involved. Eleanor smiled, took the dish, and set it on the stove. You didn't have to. I wanted to, Wanda said. You've been so quiet since the conference. I figured this place could use some sugar and sarcasm. They ate by the window, laughing about old courthouse gossip and a will once signed in red crayon. It was a quiet evening. No trials, no arguments. Just warm cobbler, fading light, and the comfort of home. Eleanor looked around. Everything here, books, passwords, silence, was hers again. Later that night, as she washed the last plate, her laptop chimed. An email from the New York governor's office. Invitation to testify on elder rights legislation. Her hand hovered over the mouse. The answer was already yes. The state chamber echoed as her name was called. Eleanor Joyce Mallory. She stood steady. For a year, I was spoken over, spoken for, and nearly spoken out of my life. No script, just truth. She spoke of quiet coercion, forged documents, and the pain of being treated as disposable. Power of attorney is not a weapon, she said. The chamber rose in applause. That evening, her speech spread across news outlets. PBS requested full footage. NPR ran a segment. Emails came in. Even Judge Tolman wrote, "You didn't just win. You changed the meaning of winning." Then came the DA's call. "We're launching a task force. We're calling it the Mallory Protocol." Eleanor gripped the phone. Her voice had become law. Eleanor blinked. Her name turned into policy, into prevention. She didn't cry, but her hand gripped the phone a little tighter. "What do you need from me?" she asked. "Just what you've already given, your voice. And if you're willing, we'd like to consult with you part-time. You'd review filings, mentor legal interns, maybe speak to law enforcement groups." "I'll think about it," Eleanor said, but she already knew the answer. 3 weeks later, she sat behind a desk in a small office inside the legal aid clinic on Pine Street. A nameplate read, Eleanor J. Mallory, consultant. Her new life wasn't grand, it wasn't flashy, but it was real. Her mornings were filled with affidavit case review summaries, quiet emails from desperate daughters and overwhelmed social workers. Every day, she wore the same gold watch her husband had given her 25 years ago. She never took it off. "I don't know how you survived it," a young intern named Dahlia said one afternoon, eyes wide with admiration. Eleanor looked at her, then down at a letter from an older client fighting a power of attorney overreach in Syracuse. "I didn't survive it," she said softly. "I used it." Eleanor walked home through crisp autumn air. At her door lay a manila envelope. No stamp, just her name, in Joel's familiar handwriting. She placed it on the kitchen table, stared, made coffee, didn't drink it. Instead, she retrieved her ceramic fire bowl, stepped onto the balcony, and lit the envelope. The paper curled, blackened, disappeared into ash. She never opened it. Didn't need to. Some letters aren't for reading, they're for letting go. Back inside, she washed her hands and called the courthouse. "I'd like to renew the restraining order," she said. Same individual, still unwanted contact. It was processed that day. The rest of the afternoon, she worked in her balcony garden, basil, rosemary, lemon balm. The air smelled like release, and this time the silence was hers. Around 5, Wanda arrived, balancing a still warm dish wrapped in foil and a bottle of cider tucked under one arm. "Pea cobbler," she said proudly. "And no, I didn't use the frozen kind. Actual peeling happened. There were blisters involved." Eleanor smiled, took the dish, and set it on the stove. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," Wanda said. "You've been so quiet since the conference. I figured this place could use some sugar and sarcasm." They ate at the small round table by the window, laughing over courthouse gossip and the time Eleanor caught a clerk in 2003 trying to process a will signed in red crayon. The cobbler steamed on their plates, the sugar crust just crunchy enough to crackle under the fork. It was the kind of evening that had nothing to prove. No subpoenas, no cross-examinations, just light through the curtains and the soft hum of Wanda's off-key humming. Eleanor leaned back and looked around her home. The books on the shelf were hers. The passwords on the router were hers. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was warm, like a favorite blanket finally returned from the dry cleaner. Her name hadn't just been protected, it had been restored. The night settled like soft velvet over the co-op courtyard. Wanda left with promises of lemon bars next time and strict warnings about repotting plants without gloves. Eleanor washed the last plate and turned off the kitchen light. Her laptop chimed as she passed. One new email. From New York Governor's Office. Subject, legislative testimony invitation. Body, Miss Mallory, your work has not gone unnoticed. We'd be honored if you would testify before the State Assembly on upcoming elder rights reform legislation. Eleanor stared at the screen, one hand on the mouse, the other already reaching for her calendar. The State Assembly chamber echoed like a cathedral built for reason. High ceilings, oak-paneled walls, and rows of sharpened minds waiting behind polished nameplates. Cameras blinked red from the far corners. The buzz of low murmurs faded as the sergeant-at-arms announced her name. Miss Eleanor Joyce Mallory, private citizen, retired civil clerk, testifying on behalf of Senate Bill 414, Elder Autonomy and POA Reform. Eleanor rose from her seat, not slowly, not for effect, just steadily. Every joint felt its age, but her spine didn't notice. She adjusted her glasses, approached the mic, and looked each legislator in the eye. "My name is Eleanor Mallory, and for the better part of a year I was spoken over, spoken for, and nearly spoken out of my own life. No notes, no teleprompter, just truth." She spoke for 17 minutes about coercion that wore the mask of compassion, about bank statements changed without signatures, pharmacy pickups rerouted, the quiet terror of realizing your own child sees your autonomy as negotiable. She spoke of courtrooms and betrayal and the cost of silence. She ended with a pause, then, "Power of attorney is not a license. It is not a shortcut. It is not a weapon." The room rose to their feet before she'd even left the stage. Reporters stood. Young volunteers clapped until their hands went red. Eleanor walked down the steps, slow, composed. But inside something had shifted. The wound hadn't closed, but it had found its use. By nightfall, clips of her speech were circulating. A PBS producer requested full footage for a feature on elder law reform. NPR ran a segment titled, "Her Voice Was Nearly Stolen, Now It's Saving Thousands." Emails poured in. Former colleagues from the Kingston County Courthouse. "I'm so proud of you. We should have seen it. I've never clapped harder in my life." Even Judge Tolman sent a letter, handwritten, formal, but unmistakably human. "You didn't just win your case. You changed what cases like this mean." The district attorney called. "We're launching a task force on elder financial abuse, the Mallory Protocol." Eleanor's name turned into policy. They asked her to consult. Filings, interns, training law enforcement. She agreed. 3 weeks later, she sat in a quiet office at the legal aid clinic. A plaque read, "Eleanor J. Mallory, consultant." Her days were steady, case reviews, emails, mentorship. "I don't know how you survived," an intern once said. "I didn't survive it," Eleanor replied. "I used it." That evening, she found a manila envelope at her door. No stamp, handwritten, "Eleanor Mallory, Joel's writing." She stared at it, made coffee, didn't drink it. took the envelope outside, lit a match, and burned it in her fire bowl. She watched every word turn to ash. She didn't need to read it. Some things aren't worth knowing. Some things are better claimed in silence. Inside, she washed her hands, lavender soap, warm water, and dialed the courthouse. "I'd like to file for a restraining order renewal," she said plainly. "Yes, same individual. Yes, still unwanted contact. I have evidence. It was delivered in person." The clerk on the other end paused. "Understood, Miss Mallory. We'll process it today." By noon, the paper trail was official. The boundaries she built now had ink and law behind them. She spent the rest of the afternoon in dirt. She repotted her basil, clipped the withered leaves from her rosemary, and rearranged the planters along her balcony rail. The air smelled of soil and lemon balm. Her fingers were stained, her sleeves pushed back. It felt like cleansing, without ceremony. Around 5, Wanda arrived, balancing a still-warm dish wrapped in foil and a bottle of cider tucked under one arm. "Pea cobbler," she said proudly. "And no, I didn't use the frozen kind. Actual peeling happened. There were blisters involved." Eleanor smiled, took the dish, and set it on the stove. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," Wanda said. "You've been so quiet since the conference. I figured this place could use some sugar and sarcasm." They ate at the small round table by the window, laughing over courthouse gossip, and the time Eleanor caught a clerk in 2003 trying to process a will signed in red crayon. The cobblers steamed on their plates, the sugar crust just crunchy enough to crackle under the fork. It was the kind of evening that had nothing to prove. No subpoenas, no cross-examinations, just light through the curtains and the soft hum of Wanda's off-key humming. Eleanor leaned back and looked around her home. The books on the shelf were hers. The passwords on the router were hers. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was warm, like a favorite blanket finally returned from the dry cleaner. Her name hadn't just been protected. It had been restored. The night settled like soft velvet over the co-op courtyard. Wanda left with promises of lemon bars next time and strict warnings about repotting plants without gloves. Eleanor washed the last plate and turned off the kitchen light. Her laptop chimed as she passed. One new email. From New York Governor's Office. Subject, Legislative Testimony Invitation. Body, Miss Mallory, your work has not gone unnoticed. We'd be honored if you would testify before the State Assembly on upcoming elder rights reform legislation. Eleanor stared at the screen, one hand on the mouse, the other already reaching for her calendar. The State Assembly room fell silent as Eleanor J. Mallory, retired civil clerk, approached the mic to testify on Senate Bill 414. "For a year," she said, "I was spoken over, spoken for, nearly spoken out of my life." In 17 powerful minutes, she told of quiet coercion, stolen autonomy, and courtrooms that almost erased her. "Power of attorney is not a weapon," she ended. The room rose in a standing ovation. That night, clips of her speech went viral. PBS and NPR called. Emails flooded in, colleagues, judges, strangers. "You gave us a voice." Then came the district attorney. A new task force on elder abuse was launching, named the Mallory Protocol. They asked her to consult. She said she'd think about it. She already knew. Weeks later, Eleanor sat in a modest office at the legal aid clinic, reviewing cases and mentoring interns. Her life was quiet, purposeful. "I don't know how you survived," one intern said. Eleanor smiled, replying, "I didn't survive it. I used it." That evening, she walked home through golden autumn leaves. At her doorstep lay a manila envelope. No postage. She bent down, turned it over. Her hands froze. The handwriting was unmistakable. Joel Mallory.